We're back looking at how faith-filled voters affect the U.S. political race. And what happens when the pulpit is relied on by a president? Reverend Billy Graham holds the distinction of having a pastoral relationship with more U.S. presidents than anyone. At nearly 90, in what he said was his final press interview, Dr. Graham reflected on that. His son Franklin Graham spoke with us about the sensitive work of encouraging the White House. It was a day unlike any other.
When he prays with you in the Oval Office or the upstairs at the White House, you feel that he's praying for you, not the president.
A warm spring day in 2007, 3 American presidents gathered with hundreds of others to pay tribute to this man, evangelist Billy Graham.
My testimony today is that I'm just one of tens of millions of people whose spiritual lives have been shaped by Billy Graham.
Their words and presence bore powerful witness to the simple but oft-forgotten truth that even the powerful and mighty have spiritual lives and needs.
And so we're gathered here today because Billy Graham, the man, the preacher, the humble farmer's son who helped change the world, is a spiritual gift to all of us.
The man known as America's pastor gave spiritual guidance to more presidents than any other person. So to help us understand the influence of faith in the highest political office in the world, we went to a man who called Billy Graham not pastor, but dad, Billy Graham's son, Franklin. Franklin, thank you very much for being with us today. Tell us how faith does impact the highest office in the land.
Well, in this country, faith is very important to most Americans, have some level of faith. And we have elected leaders over the past. Not every leader is necessarily a man that has been a man or woman of faith, but that is important to us.
Your father had relationships with more presidents than any other citizen.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Tell us some examples of where you knew he encountered a president that was facing a situation that he believed God's power was going to be needed.
Well, I think it would just go back to something that's more recent, and that would be the first Gulf War, where President Bush Sr. Knew that the war was getting ready to start that evening.
But the night he spent with us at the White House, as Desert Storm was being launched, stands out above the others. Like any president, I felt the decision to commit American troops into harm's way, which is a decision, incidentally, that only a president can make, was also the hardest decision that I had to make when I was president. And to be sure, I never, even for a second, doubted the moral clarity of our mission that January night in 1991. But as someone who had lived through war and who had seen death up close, I was naturally concerned for the life of every man and woman wearing our uniform. And just as President Lincoln had observed, I found myself driven to my knees in prayer, and here's what he said, by the conviction that I had nowhere else to turn.
It raises the question, does the president's office manipulate the faith leaders for the point of currying favor and support? Well, how does that dance work?
Well, I think that has been the case in the past, no question. But my father never sought it. My father knew at times he was being used for their political purposes, but he used that relationship to present the gospel and to be a clear voice for Jesus Christ in those situations.
Your nation has led in defining what it means to have a separation of church and state. And yet, when it comes to the election, faith is a huge issue. Describe the pros and cons of that.
Well, the separation of church and state was never really in our Constitution. This is something that didn't come out to, I think it's after the Second World War. was that language that was introduced. So historically, yes, the church and the state have worked side by side.
As you look towards this big date in November for your nation, what are the ways that you think Americans should be praying and positioning for this election?
Well, we need to pray for God's choice.
Franklin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna.
When Listen Up returns, they all follow Jesus Christ, working in different faith-based jobs. How do they feel about how Christianity is represented in U.S. politics? That's next.
Closed captioning provided by Duca Financial Services Credit Union. Discover more affordable banking at duca.com.
Listen Up is all about news that takes you